Good afternoon. I would like to welcome Dr. Podolsky, staff, students, our esteemed guests and presenters and participants to the inaugural Asian Pacific Americans Heritage Month celebration hosted by Asian Pacific Islander BRG and the Office of Institutional Equity and Access's Division of Diversity and Inclusion, highlighting the theme, Remembering the Beauty and Legacy of the Journey from East to West. Hello, I am Archana Kroniaker, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Hospital Facilities and have the pleasure of being the executive sponsor of the Asian Pacific Islander Business Resource Group. It is my honor to kick off this program today. Our BRG is just over a year old, and due to COVID-19, we have not had the opportunity to host many in-person events. However, this year we are in a position to host our first ever campus-wide signature event virtually on a grand scale. To highlight this Heritage Month, we have a variety of Asian cuisines being served at the cafeteria to celebrate the rich heritage of this community. Today, we have a very entertaining event lined up for you. We will begin with Dr. Podolsky's opening remarks, which will be followed by a video montage featuring UT Southwestern employees describing their journey, highlighting their lasting legacy of those who traveled from east to west, followed by a special keynote address from Chow, CEO of AT&T Business, all wrapped up and enlightened with a musical tribute to begin and end the event. But first, I would like to extend our support to our UT Southwestern Asian community in response to the increasing anti-Asian racism events. We are deeply disturbed by the growing reports of bias and attacks against Asians across the country and the world. As our nation experiences a rise in anti-Asian harassment and even violence amid COVID-19 pandemic, we at the API BRG condemn these attacks and stand in solidarity and want to support our Asian and Asian American community. We are fortunate, grateful, and humbled to work at an organization that supports diversity and respects every individual in every encounter, every day. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce the President of UT Southwestern, Dr. Daniel Podolsky, to give us his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Archana, and thank you for your leadership in serving as the executive sponsor for our Asian and Pacific Islander BRG. I also extend a special thanks to our keynote speaker, Chow, CEO of AT&T Business. As the first woman to hold that position, and indeed the first woman of color to serve as a CEO at AT&T in its more than 100-year history, you are inspiring through your vision and creative leadership. Launched in January 2020, the Asian and Pacific Islander BRG has quickly become one of the largest BRGs on our campus, with more than 230 members. Since their inception, they have hosted nearly 30 events and reached more than 1,500 participants on the UT Southwestern campus. Of particular importance was the panel discussion coordinated earlier this year to discuss the increasing anti-Asian racism being seen across the United States. The Asian and Pacific Islander BRG has been instrumental in uniting the UT Southwestern community and initiating conversations that help all of us better understand what we can do to show our support and advocate for our colleagues, friends, and neighbors, especially at this time when acts of violence and hate crimes directed against Asians and Pacific Islanders have continued to increase. Their work, along with other BRGs, has been even more salient in this past year when we have seen acts of bigotry, racism, and intolerance come to the fore, including violence focused on Asian communities unleashed by pandemic-driven hatred. Today's event provides an opportunity to recommit ourselves to the work of diversity and inclusion at UT Southwestern, and in particular to acknowledge the many important roles that Asian and Pacific Islanders play here at UT Southwestern and in our community broadly. Asian and Pacific Islanders hold important responsibilities at all levels of our organization, including leading clinical teams, pioneering innovative research, educating the next generation of healthcare professionals, and advancing the work of our mission in all dimensions. In fact, more than a third of our faculty and of our medical students, as well as 21% of our staff, 37% of our graduate students and 12% of our School of Health Professions students identify themselves as Asian and Pacific Islanders. I share these statistics as a reminder of who we are at UT Southwestern, and as importantly, the community we represent and serve. So when we hear statistics like verbal harassment of Asian and Pacific Islanders is up 68% across the country since the start of the pandemic, and physical assault is up 11%, we can understand that these numbers are more than figures. They represent hate directed against our colleagues, and that it requires our action and support, knowing that any type of intolerance or hatred has no place at UT Southwestern. In addition to the mounting rhetoric and xenophobic violence our colleagues and friends have encountered in the past year, many are watching closely as news of the devastating impact of COVID-19 has taken hold in Southeast Asia, with the number of COVID-related deaths nearly doubling week over week since the end of March. India trails only the United States now in total number of confirmed cases and has the third largest number of COVID-19 deaths since the start of the pandemic. And undoubtedly, the number of confirmed cases is an underreporting of the number of true cases and patients affected. I'm sure many of you have seen the disturbing news reports of limited supplies and even reports of hospitals running out of oxygen in India. News of banquet halls being turned into temporary COVID care centers due to the growing demand and the limits of the healthcare infrastructure. I know that many of our colleagues at UT Southwestern have family and friends living in India, and I encourage everyone in the UT Southwestern community to reach out to your Indian and Indian American colleagues to check on them and their families in what has been an extremely challenging year and a worrisome time for so many reasons. Today represents an opportunity to come together to celebrate what makes UT Southwestern so special, our people and the diverse experiences, ethnicities, and backgrounds which we represent in the collective. And as I know, those participating in our event today are aware that UT Southwestern is home to remarkably talented individuals. And to begin our program, we will have an opportunity to hear from one of them. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Xingyi Fang, Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics, who will perform for us on her violin.
for an amazing performance. I'm Nancy Nelson, and I serve as a talent sourcing partner in human resources. I also serve as co-chair of the Communications Committee in the API BRG. Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month is an annual celebration that began in 1978 with President Jimmy Carter designating the first week of May to recognize the contributions and influence of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans to the history, culture, and achievements in the United States. It wasn't until 1992 when George H.W. Bush later passed a bill to extend Asian American Heritage Week to the entire month of May. May was chosen to mark the immigration of the first Japanese to the United States and to mark the anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which included over 20,000 Chinese workers. Today, our diverse population of over 20 million Asian Americans have roots in more than 20 countries in Asia and India. Asian Americans have made several notable contributions in U.S. history that include technology, fashion, food, and healthcare. Several have made the challenging journey from the East to West and bring with them their legacies that we must celebrate together. We are honored to feature the following speakers: Dr. Lu Lei, Dr. Anupam Raina, Dr. Helen Yin, and AVP of Surgical Services, Priya Vondaker. They will share their experiences and contributions they have made to UT Southwestern. As we turn our attention to them, let's recognize how our diversity makes us stronger together.
Asian Pacific American Heritage Month is our collective time to celebrate the achievements of Asian American and Pacific Islander Americans and recognize their critical contributions throughout U.S. history, society, and culture. This year, UT Southwestern aims to highlight the journey traveled from east to west, honoring the legacy of those who traveled to the United States and added to the diverse fabric of this nation.
The origin of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month dates to 1978, after resolutions were passed by Congress and signed into law by President Jimmy Carter, which designated 7 days in May as Asian Pacific American Week. In his first proclamation for Asian Pacific American Week, President Carter spoke of the significant role Asian Pacific Americans have played in the creation of a dynamic and pluralistic American society, with their contributions to the sciences, arts, industry, government, and commerce.
In that proclamation, President Carter also spoke on how the United States has not always fully appreciated the talents and the contributions which Asian Americans have brought to the nation, and how until 1965, Asians were discriminated against through exclusionary immigration and naturalization laws, and other discrimination in education, housing, and employment.
In 1990, Congress passed another law which expanded the observance of Asian Pacific American Heritage Week to a month in May 1990. This law charged the people of the United States to observe Asian Pacific American Heritage Month with appropriate ceremonies, programs, and activities. Pursuant to that law, every U.S. president has annually issued proclamations designating May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
We celebrate Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in the month of May for two reasons. First, to commemorate the arrival of the first known Japanese immigrant to the U.S. on May 7, 1843. Second, to honor the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10, 1869, the building of which up to 20,000 Chinese workers participated in.
Beginning with the 2009 proclamation, presidents have expanded the commemoration to include the full term Pacific Islanders, and presidential proclamations have been issued in honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
A common thread amongst many API members of our UT Southwestern community is resilience. As many overcame a number of challenges on their journey west or shattered barriers and perceived ceilings as they set a new bar for creativity and excellence in science, discovery, and education. We want to recognize a few of our leaders who have helped tell the story of their journey from east to Wes.
My name is Priya Vondaker. I am the Associate Vice President for Surgical Services and Digestive Diseases, and I joined UT Southwestern in January of 2013. I think it's very important that we celebrate API Heritage Month because it gives us an opportunity to showcase our culture and our heritage and what that means to us and what that means to everybody else. And while there's a focus on a month, it really should be something that we celebrate and educate people on all year. I'm really proud to be a part of this group. I'm really proud of the opportunity to share my experiences because there are people that could be watching this today that see something in me that they could see for themselves. I'm first generation Indian American, so it's really about my parents' journey here. So my father made the decision to further his education. He was looking to get actually his second master's in industrial engineering, and Mississippi State University was going to offer him an assistantship. So after they finished, he finished his education at Mississippi State. They got my father got his first job in a town called Kosciuszko, Mississippi, another small town, probably about 60 miles outside of Starkville. And there was a different set of challenges to face there. So when my father was looking for housing, he wasn't able to find any housing that was available to him. So what it turned out to be was that no one was actually willing to rent a house to him. My parents were the first foreigners in that town, and they looked different, they were different, and to the other people in that town, they were an unknown. And so I think that, the people that had housing to offer were skeptical and probably a little apprehensive, just that unknown, not having any exposure to Indians or anyone of a foreign descent. So it actually took my father's supervisor, his boss at the time, to talk to the landlord and say, it's okay, I've hired him, I can vouch for him, so please rent them a house. So I think that was a little bit shocking to my parents too. So the courage that it takes to start over, leave your family, and really build a life here is really inspiring. And so, when I reflect on my own challenges as a first generation Indian American, while my parents had their challenges, we, as first generation, had similar challenges. For example, I went to a very small private school outside of Jackson, Mississippi, and I was the only person that looked like me, other than my sister. And so it was challenging to be the only person that looked like me and what that meant to others. And in moments, I felt very accepted. But then in other moments, I didn't. For example, not being asked to go to homecoming or things like that because, there was probably a hesitancy to ask the one person that looks different from everybody else. Anecdotally, and fun fact, fast forward to the late 90s, my husband and I were in the Chicago area, and we had received or got tickets to go see the Oprah Winfrey show back when she had her show in Chicago after the end of the show, kind of as the credits are rolling. And so I stood up and I said, I just wanted to say hi from Kosciuszko, Mississippi. For those of you that don't know, Oprah was born in Kosciuszko and lived a portion of her life in Kosciuszko. And she stood up and she kind of turned her head to the side and she said, "Wow, there wasn't none of you there when I was there." And of course the audience chuckled, but I share that because it was really indicative of how people in that town, really, we were the first there. And so I take that forward to now. When I first joined UT Southwestern in my role, it was really interesting. I spent some time rounding in all of the areas, and I met with an individual that's of Indian descent. And he really said to me, he goes, it really makes us proud to have someone of Indian descent in your position. It's nice to see people in positions like yours that look like us. And so, that's very rewarding. And I think it helps others know that it's important that there are people that look like you. Everybody wants that level of acceptance. Everybody wants that level of appreciation for your differences.
My name is Lu Lei, and I have been at UT Southwestern for 17 years. I am a physician scientist and a professor of dermatology here at UT Southwestern. I was born in the midst of the Vietnam War. My mother was a teacher and my father was an officer in the South Vietnam Army, working with the American. So when the communists took over South Vietnam, they put my father in the re-education camp, and I was not allowed to go to university city. But I was a young boy. My dream was to go to school. I just wanted to go to school, and I have big dream. So I decided to escape from Vietnam. I was 16-year-old, just finished 10th grade. And I got together with my other 3 friends who was older than me. And we decided to cross the border from Vietnam to Cambodia. And then in Cambodia, we put our money together to buy a very small boat. In fact, it's about 6 meters long and about 1.5 meters wide. And then we just set out to the sea with the hope that we will go to Thailand, because Thailand was the closest country that accept a refugee from Vietnam. Luckily, we make it to Thailand. In the refugee camp, I began to apply to come to the United States. And it was hard. Looking back, it was even harder to apply to go to medical school because there was just so many people who wanted to go to the United States. But luckily, my father worked with the Americans, so that helped my application. And I finally made it to Long Beach, California, after more than a year living in the refugee camp. There were so many challenges. Now, think about it. I was just 17-year-old by myself without my mom and my dad coming to a whole new country with a whole new culture, and everything was new to me. But most importantly, I needed a job. I have to work to support myself. So after a few weeks of landing in California, I found a job working at McDonald's. I went to school from 8 to 3:30 or so. I have to quickly took the bus home, changed my clothes to the McDonald's uniform, took the bus to McDonald's and start working from 5 to midnight. The problem is that by the time I finished the shift, there was no more bus. So I literally have to walk home from McDonald's almost 5 miles. So it took me almost an hour and a half in the middle of the night. And then I have to quickly wake up the next day to go to school. So that was very hard. But I learned a big lesson from working at McDonald's. Is that I cannot work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. I have to do well in school. And that's what I did. After coming to America, this country gave me an opportunity to work very hard and to achieve my dream. I was able to go to school. That's the reason why I came to this country. I graduated from university, but I'm here today because I had so many great mentors, not just one, who believed in me and who took a chance and believed that I would be successful in my career of choice. The commitment from the leadership and everyone here at UT Southwestern on diversity, inclusion, and equality based on the idea that science and medicine have no racial or gender boundary, have created a working environment that I feel very belonging. I came to work every day knowing that I'm being respected and that my idea and my contribution count towards the mission of this university.
I'm Anupam Raina. I work as a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Molecular Biology, and I'm a neurobiologist by profession and study Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So I've been in UT Southwestern for 1.5 years as of now. I'm basically from the valley of Kashmir, the home of Himalayas, from India. So my ancestors and parents had a very good life until we were forced to move out of our hometown because of religious riots that took place in 1989. Therefore, I was born in New Delhi and I was raised in the east and the west of India. I did my bachelor's and master's in the south of India, and where I worked as a scientist. In my entire clan, I'm the first one to travel from the east to the west. Towards the end of my PhD, I have moved to the US. So the transition was very smooth, I would say, because UT Southwestern really provided me most of the information, where to search for an apartment, the reviews of students for everything. It was really great. One thing that UT Southwestern has done to make me a sense of belonging here is to give me an opportunity to narrate my story, as I've never ever done this before, wherever I have been. So I think UT Southwestern has made me feel that I'm important and I matter.
My name is Helen Yin. I am a professor of physiology and associate dean of the Office of Women's Careers. And I came to UT Southwestern in 1979, so I'm one of the old-timers, long time ago. I was born in Shanghai, China, and during that time, the civil war between the nationalists, which was the one in power, and the communist China were winding down. And my parents realized that they would not do very well under communist rule. So they moved to Hong Kong. As Shanghainese, there is a large immigration of Shanghainese to Hong Kong, which speaks Cantonese. So my parents are strangers in a strange land, even though everybody is Chinese. They didn't speak the language, the food is all different, everything is different. But they strived and they were able to build a life. So that is a very good immigrant story of immigrants coming from one part of the country to another. During this time, for 24 years, there was no communication between my parents and their extended family in China because there was no official communications between China to the outside world. So in 1972, President Nixon opened up relations and the floodgate opened. So that is when the story of going from east to west started. I became a undergraduate at United States and did graduate school, and I got my citizenship. And my family, about 8 of my cousins also came here for graduate school. And so now we have 4 generations living in the United States. And in terms of UT Southwestern, we have a huge population of AAPIs. We have 24% Asians. That is much higher than the Dallas-Fort Worth of 7.9%. And in terms of faculty and medical students, we also have a huge amount. So they will be the future of the United States and UT Southwestern. And I think we needed to elevate the idea that they are major contributors as well.
At UT Southwestern, as we come together to promote health and a healthy society that enables achievement of full human potential, we recognize that we are also standing on the shoulders of the many great individuals who walk these halls before us.
Join us this Asian Pacific American Heritage Month and every month in honoring the history, personal stories, and journeys of all our Asian Pacific Islander American employees.
Wow, what a great video! Thank you for sharing your interesting stories and experiences. My name is Mia Ding, co-chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Business Resource Group. I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing our keynote speakers for today's celebration, Ann Chow. Ann was appointed Chief Executive Officer of AT&T Business in September 2019. She is the first woman to hold this position and the first woman of color CEOs in AT&T history. Ann and her organization of over 30,000 employees are responsible for serving nearly 3 million business customers, covering over $36 billion in revenue. With decades in the industry, Ann has led many global organizations through many transformations, developing and executing innovative growth strategies. She is passionate about education, diversity and inclusion, advancing women in technology, cultivating next-generation leaders, and customers' excellence. Ann is involved in many of AT&T employee groups worldwide and serves as the executive sponsors for AT&T's Women of Business Employee Network and the Asia Pacific Women's Organization. Her many contributions to business and the community are widely recognized. Ann received the Gold Stevie Award as Female Executive of the Year, Business Services. And most recently, she was named to Fortune's 2020 Most Powerful Woman in Business list. Ann holds an MBA with distinction from Cornell University, a Bachelor of Science degree, and a Master of Engineering degree in Electrical Engineering from Cornell. She is also a graduate of the pre-college division of the Juilliard School of Music. She lives in Dallas-Fort Worth area with her husband, 2 daughters, and their rescue Australian Shepherd. Please join me in welcoming Ann Chow.
Thank you so much, Mia, for that generous introduction. And hello, everyone here at UT Southwestern. I'm so honored and privileged to be here with all of you in celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And I'm so honored that you asked me to come speak with all of you. What I thought I'd do over the next couple of minutes is share a little bit about my journey as a proud Asian American and talk a little bit about leadership and how we can each embrace and embody the most authentic leader that we are. The name of my talk here is Be Real, Be True, Be You. And so I hope that you enjoy this discussion. So first, let me start out with my origin story. Each of us has an origin story. You know, we all came from somewhere. My origin story, of course, begins with my parents. And my parents are from Taiwan. They got together via a matchmaker, which was very common in their day and age. And my mother said to my dad that she would marry him only if they went to America. And why did she do that? She knew even back then that America was the place where your dreams could come true and that you could realize your greatest potential. And so in the 1960s, my parents emigrated to the US. They actually moved to Missouri, which is where my dad did his graduate degrees. He got his master's and his PhD in electrical engineering, and that is actually the place of my birth, is in the Midwest. My dad's first job was with the famed Bell Laboratories. And so when I was very, very young, we moved to New Jersey. So I am, despite the fact that I live in Texas now, I am a Jersey girl through and through. I have one younger brother who happens to be a doctor, and so I have a very close place in my heart for all healthcare professionals. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you for caring for our community, for caring for your loved ones, and for caring for all of us, especially during these incredible times associated with the pandemic. We owe you a world of thanks. Really, I so truly appreciate that. So growing up, my brother and I, we had a very typical immigrant upbringing. With my parents, you know, they pushed us to be the best that we can be. You might imagine, many of you out there may have a familiar story, but to my parents, education was everything. They wanted to make sure that my brother and I had access to
everything that could be offered. You know, we had a very, very simple upbringing. My parents came to this country with very, very little. And so, you know, there was a point where my mother actually made our clothes. And so we had a very simple life. But my parents poured everything into us. They taught us that with an education, you can go anywhere. You can do anything. And so that's actually a big part of my leadership foundation today, is this commitment to lifelong learning. On this topic of education, I will tell you also, one of my philosophies is that your education and your experiences and your skills are the one thing in your life that nobody can ever take away. You can earn money, you can earn fame, you can earn love, you can earn your health, but all of those things can be taken away. Your education and your experiences and your skills are the one thing in your life that cannot. And my parents, even back in that day, despite the cultural gaps, despite the language gaps, despite the generational gaps, really instilled that in my brother and I. And so he went off and became the doctor. And for me, growing up, you know, I thought at one point I wanted to be a musician. I went to music school at the Juilliard School of Music in Manhattan, in New York City. And from the time I was 10 till I was 17, I went through regular school in my town, and then also went to music school on the weekends. But come about high school, I realized that, you know, I probably didn't have what it took to be a professional musician. And so while my dream at the time was to perform in Carnegie Hall, I realized that I probably needed a better fallback plan. And so I followed in my father's footsteps and became an electrical engineer. I went to school at Cornell University in upstate New York. You can tell I'm East Coast through and through. And you know, we then proceeded to get degrees in electrical engineering as well as my MBA. You know, from there, you know, I met my husband in grad school. We have two beautiful, wonderful daughters who are now both in college. One of my daughters is at Georgia Tech, a fourth-year chemical engineer. My other one just finished her freshman year at University of Michigan as an engineer. We don't know what kind. And so several years ago, we had an opportunity to move to the great state of Texas, and we took that opportunity. And that's how we wound up to where we are today. A couple of other thoughts about my upbringing and my journey, because they really serve as the foundation for my leadership values and my leadership style. Another thing that my parents taught me was to be in service of others. You know, they could never have come to this country if they did not have a sponsoring family. They were always very, very, very active in the community. You know, I was a Girl Scout growing up, and so this idea of service and being in service of others was very much in our foundation. I would also tell you that just being a second generation American, I saw the struggles and the risks that my parents took throughout their lives, and even to come to this country without knowing the language. And for me, that sort of risk profile, I mean, I feel like there's nothing that I could do that would even ever rival the kind of courage that they needed and the kind of risks that they took. So that's another part of what's in my DNA. And then I would say also, the last thing is this notion of immigrant paranoia. What do I mean by that? My parents taught me that you always have to have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. So yes, you're working hard for your plan A, but at any moment that could evaporate. And so you always better have a plan and a safety net and a safety net and a safety net. And that has informed my career and kind of informed my career journey. So let me back up. Okay, so now let me talk a little bit about how that journey then parlayed into my career. I have been now at AT&T for, believe it or not, it'll be 31 years actually on June 1st. And I know that seems like it's completely impossible, but it is in fact true. And so coming out of grad school, coming out of business school, the very first job I took was at AT&T. It was as a network architect. When I started with the company, I never, ever, ever dreamed that I would be here 31 years later, or that I would be the CEO of an operating unit that is 36 billion strong. In fact, the operating unit that I have responsibility for today is the size of a Fortune 100 company. if I take a step back and I look at this career that I've had, for which I am so blessed, but yes, I worked really, really hard for it. I have had 17 different jobs, so this is my 17th assignment. I have worked for 26 different people, and I've spent about half of my time in P&L roles and half of my time not. And so if you take a step back and you look at it, a big portion of my time has been spent out in the market serving customers, and I have managed to navigate my career more because I have preferred it to be focused on the business community. And so my team and I, we are responsible for AT&T Business. AT&T Business is responsible for serving business customers of all shapes and sizes across all industries across the country, and in fact, yes, around the world. We serve small businesses very locally. We serve hospitals, medical institutions. We serve the public sector, like the federal government, state and local government, our first responders and public safety. We also serve large global multinationals as well. The scope of my operating unit is over 30,000 people. We offer services in upwards of 200 countries and territories all around the world. And we have upwards of 3 million business customers. And so that's the scope of our unit. And we provide these businesses and these organizations with communication solutions, whether they be wireless, whether they be fiber-based, whether they be oriented around applications, management, or otherwise. We're very, very excited, by the way, for 5G, what that will mean, especially in the healthcare space, and are grateful for the partnership and the relationship we have with fine institutions, including UT Southwestern. As I think about my career journey, other aspects of it are important. You know, you might be thinking, wow, and that's a lot of jobs. Like, did you actually want to have 17 different jobs? Or did you actually think that you were going to become a CEO? Or was that your aspiration? And the answer is no, absolutely not. I mean, I thought I was going to work for the company and it would be like 5 years, then I'd go move on to the next thing. One of the driving reasons why I have chosen to build my career at AT&T is that it is one that embraces learning and embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I always said to myself that if I were bored, that I would leave, because I am one who has to be continuously learning. Again, hearkening back to my Asian American roots, growing up, in suburban New Jersey, and so for me, this idea of always learning, of figuring out how to contribute more, figuring out how to have a bigger impact. I was able to do that in one company for which I am truly grateful. A big part of my leadership passion is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at AT&T, we have dozens of employee resource groups, employee groups, business groups. One of my greatest joys, quite frankly, at work is to be able to support these organizations. We have a Pan-Asian resource group called Inspiration. I have been an executive advisor for them for many years. I was the executive sponsor for our Asia Pacific Women's Organization, which focuses on our women community in the Asia Pacific region. A couple of years ago, myself and a couple of others, we started a new business group, employee network, called AT&T Women of Business. This one is focused on women in business, and now we are almost 5,000 members strong all around the world, and we address really important topics like bias in the workplace, the importance of male allies to enable women to be successful, and so much more. And perhaps one of the programs that I helped to champion that I'm truly, truly proud of is AT&T's Women of Color initiative. Did you know that by the year 2050, 2060, women of color will be the majority of women in the United States? And I felt that so strongly that we as a company could continue to do more to lean in to this opportunity in support of women of color. And there was more and more research that was coming to light around how if organizations only focus on women and not women of color explicitly, women of color would be left behind. And I wanted to make sure that AT&T remained the leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are now on our third, fourth cohort of 200 women in each class, plus their supervisors, who go through an incredible learning experience together, and help them realize their greatest potential. And so that's one of the things that I'm just most proud of in terms of some of the work that we've done in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the other thing that is important to me is really engaging very actively in the community. I believe that each one of us has an opportunity to choose to be a leader. It's not just in our day job, but if we have an opportunity to drive progress in other ways, we can do so. And a little bit about my background: I serve on the president's board at Georgia Tech. I'm on the board at Franklin Covey. Just recently joined the Dallas Mavericks Advisory Council, and also recently co-authored a book called The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias, which, for those of you who might be interested in the topic, feel free to pick that up. I get no proceeds from it, so that is not a commercial. So anyway, and a little bit about that book, because I think it is very much germane to the heart of my topic around authentic leadership, is that this book is really designed to focus on leaders in the context of building high-performing teams. And so don't we all just want to be part of a high-performing team? Don't we all just want to realize our fullest potential? And the reality is that as humans, we all have bias. We all have conscious bias, and we all have unconscious bias. And what this book really tries to do is to help us work through that for ourselves, so that we can work in support of others, which is very much germane to what I'm about to share with you. Okay, so now be real, be true, be you. Lofty words, but this is what your life is all about. It is all about being you. I've got some thoughts that I've gathered from many years of leadership that I'd like to share with you on how you might embrace your most powerful, most authentic, your most truest self. Okay, so a couple of tips here. First thing, feed your curiosity. One of the things that, and this probably isn't a surprise for you now that you've listened to me for a couple of minutes, but I have been accused in the past of being insatiably curious. I think that's a little bit of the engineer in me, but I also think it's because I just want to know, right? I love learning. And so I'd encourage you, if you're curious about something, feed it. If you're in a meeting, all right, I'm not saying that this is happening all the time, but I bet that there are times when you're on the edge of your seat, whether it's virtually or one day again we'll all be in person. But you're on the edge of your seat because you want to learn more. And then at other times during this conference call or meeting, you're like, man, I don't even know what they're saying, and I don't care, and I'm not really listening because I'm not that interested in the topic, right? So for each of us, right, your curiosity is telling you something. The fact that you want to learn more, the fact that you want to understand more, follow it, all right? Build on your strengths, embrace your strengths. Too often I think whether it's in academia, whether it's in the business world, whether it's in the public sector or otherwise, we tend to focus on people's weaknesses, right? When I think about the early days of my careers in the 90s, every performance review I got from a manager was telling me about the things that I was doing wrong. It wasn't necessarily focusing on the things of, hey, Ann, these are your strengths. Figure out ways to embrace them, right? To grow them, to amplify their impact on the business. And so focus on your strengths, because that is part of your secret magic. Okay, success. One of the questions that I get a lot is, hey, Ann, what were your keys to success? I mean, how did you get to where you are? And I will tell you this, it's a little bit of science, but a lot of serendipity. What success might mean for you is different than what it might mean for me, what it might mean for your friend, what it might mean for your boss. And by the way, success for me when I was in my 20s is totally different than it was when I was in my 30s, than it was in my 40s, than now I am in my 50s. Right? To help you dimensionalize that a little bit, in my 20s, when I first started working at AT&T, my success was largely defined by me building my social network, right? And getting the job done, earning financial independence so that I could go off and figure out what I wanted my life to be. Then I met somebody, right? Then I had to worry about him, got married, right? And my definition of success changed. And then when I had kids, it changed yet again, right? And as each stage of your life progresses, your vision for yourself and your success and your priorities will evolve. I believe that life is an optimization equation. That's a little bit of the engineer in me. And that at any point in your life, you are looking to optimize to a certain set of priorities. And it is so important for you to have clarity about what those priorities are. I am not saying that you shouldn't ask others for their thoughts. I'm not saying that it is not important to have a coach, to have a mentor, to lean on people who know you, right? But what I'm saying is that you need to stay true to your definition of success. And it is okay, in fact, it is normal and it is expected that that vision you have for yourself, that view of success, the meaning of success for you will evolve as your life and your career in the context of your life evolves. Okay. Next point I want to make about being real, being true, and being you is to live and lead courageously. All right? Courage is, I think all of us would not be surprised if we took a step back and said, hey, what does the world need more of? What does the world need more of in our community, in politics, with respect to our environment, with respect to healthcare, the financial system, to serving the underserved, right? To prosperity, to figuring out how we achieve prosperity for all in our society, how we achieve equity for all in our society. I think all of us would say, yeah, we need more courage, right? Courage is the opposite of comfort, all right? So, I would ask that each of you think about your lives. All right, think about what you're doing in the context of being courageous, right? I know it can be a scary word, right? And by the way, to be courageous is to be vulnerable, because to be courageous is not to not have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's what FUD stands for, right? It is to move forward in the face of your fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The most courageous people are the ones who are most vulnerable, because they're the ones who actually embrace their fears. They embrace their uncertainty, they embrace their doubt, and they figure out a way to move forward, okay? And so this is really important, because if you are not growing, what are you doing? You're stagnant, you're standing still, right? If you are too comfortable and you are not pushing yourself, what are you doing? You're not growing, you're not learning, you're not expanding your horizons. You're certainly not realizing your fullest potential, okay? And I want to reinforce this point. I believe that every single one of us makes a choice to be a leader. I do not believe leadership is associated with a title. I do not believe leadership is associated with a gender, an age, an ethnicity, a race. Leadership is a choice. And I'm asking each of you to lead in your life. Okay. Next point. This is an anism. This is a very this is one that I learned when I was probably a middle manager. I realized that, you know what is life about? What is business about? It's all about people. Okay. And the happiest we are is when we are helping other people, when we are surrounded by people who bring us joy, for whom we can listen to, learn, and grow, from whom we are helping, and we can learn from each other and experience things together, right? Whether that's in the professional dimensions of our life or the personal dimensions of our life. And so life is about meaningful relationships. And this is not to say that every relationship in your life will be meaningful, or that every person that you encounter, that you'll have this amazing relationship with. What it is intended to say is that life is meant to be lived with and for others. I mean, all of you know this as members of the UT Southwestern team, right? You know this viscerally. And if there's anything that we've learned together over this past year with this global pandemic, is that there is power in the human connection. And in fact, we need the human connection to live, don't we? One of the things that I have said since the beginning of the pandemic is that I wish that they didn't coin that term social distancing, because it's actually false. What we needed to do is physical distancing. We need social connection because we are human, right? And we thrive in relationships, in healthy, constructive, robust relationships with others. And so relationships are important. Be sure to seek and foster meaningful ones, all right? And distance yourself from the people who are not in it with you, okay? And then this last one, especially when I'm talking to an audience that has orientation, if you will, around the AAPI community, is growing up, this was a tough one, and I will tell you, even to this day, at my advanced age, I struggle with this one, right? Which is, I have always wanted to make my parents proud, right? I have always struggled to make them proud, right? And I'm constantly thinking about that. But in actuality, the person that is most important to make proud is you, right? You are you, right? And it is most important to make sure that you are guided by your values, by what you view as your greatest success, your strengths, your impact. And if you're having a bad day, or if you're in a fork in a road, whether it's a small decision or a really big one, I'll give you this little tip that I picked up years ago. And that is, I ask myself when I'm at those kinds of crossroads, I ask myself, what would make my 99-year-old self proud, right? What would my 99-year-old self want me to do? And then clarity occurs, right? We are all so inundated by data, by others, the voices of others, media. Sometimes it's hard, right? And sometimes you just got to take a step back and remember that this life is yours, and you have to make yourself proud first and foremost, more importantly than anyone else. So I hope that kind of framework has been really helpful to you guys around being real, being true, and being you. And I'd love to wrap this up. I'm a big one for quotes, so I'm going to do something that I don't typically do here, but that is I am going to quote myself. I'll share it with you up there on the screen, so I won't read it. But look, this is all about you, all right? Being authentic, being a leader is all about you. You are your greatest competitive advantage. And until each of us realize that we were each put on this earth for a particular reason, and our life's work is all about being us and becoming us, each one of us, and that each one of us has something unique to offer, we can't possibly have the greatest impact on our community or on others or on our relationships or on those whom we love, right? We have to start with us first. And as a fellow Asian American, I can tell you that this is very difficult, right? I'm not really used to focusing on myself, but this is one of my biggest key learnings, is that we each bring to the table something so truly unique, and that life is too short to try to be somebody else, right? And so be you, be real, be true, and be you. It's been great being with all of you here today. I hope you found my remarks somewhat interesting, somewhat useful. I'd be welcome to connect. You can follow me on Twitter or connect with me on LinkedIn. And thank you so very much. And I wish you a wonderful Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And now back to the program.
Hi, my name is Sunil Verma. I'm a clinical research coordinator for clinical laboratory science, and also it's an honor to be a chair for Asian Pacific Islanders BRG at UT Southwestern. It's an honor to be delivering the closing statements. There are no words to describe that would justify the conclusion of such a fabulous lineup. Thank you everyone that have made this year's Asian Pacific American Heritage Month truly remarkable. From opening remarks by Dr. Podolsky to closing music interlude to end the vignette. Thank you. Dr. Podolsky, please accept our sincere gratitude for taking time out in your busy schedule. We are very proud to be part of UT Southwest family under your esteemed leadership and guidance. And Chow from AT&T. It was enlightening to listen to you and very glad to have met you. Please accept our sincere thanks. Dr. Ananta Krishnan and Dr. Fang, we are so thankful to have you join us. Music is truly an international language which bridges gap, and it is a privilege to have such talent among us. This event would not have been possible without the support of leadership and the Office of Institutional Equity and Access. Your coordination and facilitation made this event a successful endeavor. Thank you, Mr. Travis Gill and Ms. Kanisha Caldwell and Ms. Tiffany Bradshaw. Truly admirable. Finally, to our API BRG family that includes our leadership team, Archana Kronhager, me as the chair, also headed by two co-chairs, Vishali Patel and Mia Din. You all are truly one in a million. These remarks are incomplete without the mention of all our subcommittees and their respective chairs. I'm humbled to be part of such a dynamic team, and we have a lot more to do. The Communications Subcommittee headed by Deepika Bhatia and Nancy Nelson. Membership Subcommittee headed by Lavanya Krishnan. Professional Development led by Jay Polanco, Lynn Silverman, Alina Evans. Last but not least, the Events Committee chaired by Helen Daniel and Finney Johnson. Thank you. In addition, thank you to all our members. Please accept my sincere gratitude. It makes me very proud to say we are UT Southwest strong. If you're not a member yet, or would like to find out more info about API BRGs, please reach out to us at Asian Pacific Islander BRG at utsouthwestern.edu. Now to close out this event, I'd like to thank Dr. Ananta Krishnan with her musical tribute.